The task force is committed to language justice. In order to achieve this, your participation is required. Here are some tips for how to work with ASL interpreters. Look at the deaf or hard of hearing person that you're talking to, not to the interpreter. You don't need to ask the interpreter to tell the deaf person this or that. Just address the deaf or hard of hearing person directly. Speak at a moderate pace. Typically, the interpreters will be seated or standing near to the speaker. If you are a presenter, please provide vocabulary, acronyms, songs, lyrics, etc. to the interpreters beforehand. Erase phrases like hearing impaired from your mind. And please don't ask people if they can read your lips. Thank you.
¿Qué hubo, pueblo? Cecilia
y Gloria
here is part of the language access team to remind y'all about how to help us create a multilingual space for creating change.
The task force continues to work towards language justice. Language justice means being able to fully participate in the language a person feels most comfortable in or powerful in. It also means the ability to reclaim language as a tool for liberation rather than oppression.
It's important for us to take a moment to recognize all the languages, dialects, and ways of communicating that we bring into the space. Even those ancestral languages that maybe we don't have a name for that have been violently eliminated from our families through the process of colonialism, imperialism, slavery, and assimilation.
So creating multilingual spaces is on everyone, not just the interpreters, which is why we're here to share with you a few guidelines that you can help us out with. 1, we ask you to please speak at a moderate pace. Sometimes we get super excited and we just start to talk really fast. And if that's the case, interpreters will be making this sign to remind you to please speak at a moderate pace or just please speak slower. You are welcome. If you see us, do this as well so other folks can take note.
And sometimes people are really shy, they start to mumble and murmur. It can be really hard to hear. And if that's the case, we will be making this sign, and this will let the speaker know to speak up. Again, we invite you to please do that with us.
It's also important to remember to pause after asking a question or making a comment because there's always a delay in simultaneous interpretation. If interpreters need a pause, they will be making this sign, T for timeout, to remind the folks to please pause so we can make the adjustment.
And I know we want to cheer the queers and give all the love all the time, but remember, we can only interpret for one person at a time, and we don't want to pick and choose whose voice to privilege. And if we need a reminder of this, we will be doing this sign, so please do it with us as we are all responsible for creating and maintaining a multilingual space.
Also remember that interpreters and providers are not our helpers, so please don't interrupt or talk to the interpreter/provider while they're working.
And lastly, please communicate directly with the person, not the interpreter.
And as a note, our commitment to you is to use inclusive language and respect people's pronouns. So we are intentionally using direct non-binary language to break through that binary so that everyone, o sea, todes, can be themselves in the new world we are creating.
So if you or a friend are interested in participating in this conference en español, or if you have a question about how to access multilingual spaces, come find us. We'll be by the task force check-in table.
Enjoy the conference, y'all.
Please welcome back award-winning activist and media strategist, the author of The Risk It Takes to Bloom and your Creating Change MC, Raquel Willis.
Good morning, everybody. How y'all feeling? Okay, we went through this yesterday. I know it was like half full yesterday, but I need energy. I need life. So how are y'all feeling? Awesome. This is what I want to say. So welcome back to day 2. I see a lot of folks returning from yesterday. I see some new faces. And I know y'all probably got a few friends who haven't made it back from recovering from the cruise in Kiki last night. So text them, tell them they got work to do. But I'm so glad to be back with you all and so excited for the lineup that we have today. I hope you're enjoying this breakfast. Is it scrumptious? Yeah? Okay. But you're gonna be feasting on something even more scrumptious and delicious and powerful in just a second. We are gonna dive into a fabulous plate of trans power. Are y'all ready? So as you saw in the video just a second ago, we're continuing our commitment to language justice from yesterday, and we are so proud that our next panel is multilingual. And that's a big deal. We have so many folks who have made this possible. We're providing both simultaneous and consecutive interpretation, and apologies on behalf of the task force, but you know, sometimes we just gotta mix stuff up so that it works for all our people. So y'all in it with us? Great. And there will still be live Spanish interpretation happening in this room, and if you need that, please grab equipment from the Spanish interpretation team just through the plenary doors. So as I said just a second ago, this next panel is all about how our leaders are building trans power at the intersections of various progressive movements. We're talking climate justice, reproductive justice, immigrant justice, workers' justice, racial justice, and of course, gender justice. So it is my honor to introduce our moderator, who is one of our fab NOLA ambassadors and amazing award-winning national organizer and activist who fearlessly and ferociously fights for equity, equality, and safety for the entire trans community. She is the co-director of policy and programs at Transgender Law Center and co-founder of House of Tulip, a TGNC, Catch It, trans and gender nonconforming, led resource provider in this great city of New Orleans. So I could sing so many more praises of my dear sister who makes me so proud every day, but I'll just let her bring the fire for y'all. Welcome, Mariah Moore.
Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Hello. Good morning. Oh. How are you feeling? Yeah? Welcome to my city, my home, New Orleans. And I apologize in advance for the dip in the weather, but we're gonna get back on track. All right? Are y'all ready for an amazing plenary this morning? Yeah? All right, well, I have some amazing panelists joining me. So I'm gonna introduce them one by one, okay? First, I wanna introduce union organizer Neha Cremin. Next, we have Sanchez, who is grassroots activist and human rights defender. And last but certainly not least, Pearl Ricks, advocate, artist, and caretaker. And as my sister Raquel Willis said, catch it, recently ran for the Louisiana State Legislature. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge one of our panelists that wasn't able to join us this morning and just uplift their work. Clee Claybert, who is the executive director of Imagine Waterworks here in the city of New Orleans. And I want to just take a moment to tell you a little bit about their work. Imagine Waterworks is place-based with a global vision. Since 2012, they've helped lead the charges we've seen locally in how we think about living with water, working in an intersection of reducing risk from flooding, pollution, and natural hazards. We knew that the best solutions were multidisciplinary, and so we integrated science, history, identity, and art into their work. They've worked with residents, neighborhood organizations, nonprofits, artists, families, scientists, academics, architects, small business owners, and government agencies to create various resources for our community, to hold space for conversation, and to develop hazard mitigation plans in Louisiana and nationwide. So when you get a moment, please look up Imagine Waterworks, support their work. Our commitment to climate justice is necessary, and we demand it in every space. Give Imagine Waterworks a round of applause. Somebody need to start my timer so I can stay on track, because y'all know I'll talk. I just want to also thank Creating Change for putting us in a place of prominence. It's not every day that we visit these conferences and we're on the main stage and prioritizing our conversations as it's necessary. Yes, it's very necessary. So thank you all, and thank you to so many of you all for showing up. A packed house leads to a warm heart for me, so I appreciate the support. All right, so we're gonna jump into this conversation. How you feeling, Neha?
Honestly, this mic pack is really uncomfortable.
I know.
But otherwise, I feel good.
I know. Oh, Lord, media.
I mean, like, it's also because, like, I'm wearing glasses and a mask, and this is around my ear. My poor ear is supporting so much.
This girdle I have on is supporting a lot too, child. So we're gonna, thank you. Laughter is good for the soul. So we're gonna jump right into our first question. So Neha, how does labor justice build trans power and help us get free?
I mean, if you've seen any of our shirts, the Starbucks Workers United shirts, they say trans rights are labor rights. And what that really means is labor is like a form of power. It's a way for us to build power as a community. I mean, like, as trans people, we often don't have the same political power as other groups. We often feel kind of powerless, honestly. But through labor, we're at least able to make sure that we have protections in the workplace. And I mean, a lot of trans people kind of, by design, because we live in a transphobic society, are, working in service industry jobs. We're living paycheck to paycheck. So, improving working conditions for all of us means that we're also helping trans people. So.
Absolutely, and thank you for all the work that you've done to help unionize a billion-dollar greedy company. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how did that impact specifically trans and gender nonconforming folks? And what message did that send to the greater movement?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a joke at this point that every Starbucks barista has like blue hair and pronouns. But there is like some truth to that, right? Like, a lot of Starbucks baristas are queer or trans. I know my store, 36th and May in Oklahoma City, we're a block away from the historically gay district of Oklahoma City. So all of my coworkers are queer or trans, except we have like our one straight guy coworker. He's like our diversity hire. As trans people, we don't have political power, but we wanted to make sure that our queer and trans coworkers were safe.
Absolutely.
That, like, in the workplace, they had protections, right?
Absolutely.
So.
And speaking of building that power, that political power, speaking of
want to show up and support that community or need to be building that community. Ensuring that policy and advocacy and issue education and the engagement of individuals can be accessible to everyone. There are spaces, especially when we're looking at policy, especially when and that could be workplace policy, that could be legislative policy, that could be how our landlords are engaging with us. But there becomes a point where it feels very inaccessible, where it's purposely inaccessible to make sure that power doesn't go to everyday folks, to the folks that are directly impacted. So reproductive justice for me allows a space where we can share power, we can share resources, we can share information, and the expectation is to be rah-rah. I've been in systems that want me to quiet down or bring respectability politic to change, but there's not always space for that. So the exciting part about RJ is to be up with people like this, where we have different things that we're focused on, but we all come together, and we don't have to be nice about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. I just want to say that, I'm the co-director of policy and programs at Transgender Law Center, and one of our main focuses right now is absolutely building trans power. And so what that means is that we have to be in alignment, and I speak constantly about alignment because it's necessary for us to be in alignment about how to slow this anti-trans legislation and ultimately pass laws and policies that benefit and protect our folks, right? And also recognize our humanity. And when I speak about humanity, I also speak about our folks who are in cages, right? Everyone should live fear-free, and guess what? Borders should not exist. And so my next question, yes, absolutely. My next question is also for you, Leanne. So how does your immigration work help build trans power and get us free?
Hola a todos, ¿cómo estamos? Buenos días. Con tu permiso, Mariah, y el permiso a todos ustedes. Bueno, es más, ni hay que pedir permiso. Ok. Bueno, me estoy guiando a lo del equipo de interpretación. Muy emocionada de estar aquí. Voy a hablar de mi lengua nativa, que estoy muy orgullosa de ser una mujer trans, latina, inmigrante, indígena. Relijo niete, guan, que atusun, que ahiawa, relijo rumiguate. La husun eta I, la husun eta madzun, que la husun erme, ebena, rusme. Wetna, Rusme, Egan.
Thank you. So,
hablar de la inmigración como una persona impactada, no me victimizo como tal, aunque yo estuve un año en la cárcel de inmigración, un confinamiento solitario en el famoso hoyo, viví condiciones insalubres e inhumanas. Y todas estas experiencias que yo viví en ese lugar tan terrible que ni siquiera se lo puedo decir a mi peor enemigo, se lo deseo, si es que existiera un enemigo, que es allá afuera. Entonces, eso me hizo, ¿verdad?, reflexionar que Estados Unidos, supuestamente un país de derechos humanos, todavía persiguen a nuestras múltiples identidades. Nos siguen criminalizando por nada. Actualmente, ¿verdad?, el año pasado,
So Leanne was saying, hello everyone, how's everyone doing? Good morning. I'd like to speak to you with your permission and with the support of my interpreters. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'll start first with a saying in my language because I am very proud to be a trans, Latina, immigrant, indigenous woman. What Leanne said, I'll say it in Spanish first, and then I'll say it in English. Podrán atar mis manos y mis pies, pero nunca la brillantez de mi corazón, alma y espíritu, que son armas para resistir en resiliencia por la liberación. So they could tie my hands and feet, but never the brilliance of my heart, soul, and spirit, which are the weapons to resist in resilience for liberation. And if we're going to speak about the topic of immigration, as a person who was directly impacted, I don't victimize myself. I spent 1 year in detention in solitary confinement, the famous hole, and I lived unsanitary and inhumane conditions. It was a terrible experience and a terrible place. I wouldn't even wish this upon my worst enemy were they to exist. But it provided a space for reflection for me, especially thinking about the United States, a country that presents itself as a protector of human rights, but all they do is criminalize the multiple identities that many of us hold for no reason.
Thank you. And so, Pearl, I want to start this next question with you. And I know that, to do this work, we need to be well-resourced and funded. So let's talk about some money, huh? Yeah? Who needs money? We all need money to do this work. We don't have to be uncomfortable when we talk about money. That's how we break down those barriers and get more of it when we're not afraid to talk about it. So let's talk about it. So how can well-resourced funders and LGBTQ organizations intentionally prioritize and serve trans people who are among the most marginalized? And when I say the most marginalized, I mean our working class brothers, sisters, and siblings. I mean poor, disabled, and BIPOC trans people.
Thank you for that question. First, I want to say that philanthropy is inherently harmful. I tell my funders this, I tell my partners this, I'll really tell anybody who will listen, because I think it's important that we start from that place, that there needs to be a reparation, and part of that is repair. So we're already coming from a point where philanthropy and philanthropists need to be excited about the repair that needs to be done to the people that they are funding. Another thing that I'll bring up is that so many folks are so busy doing the work, surviving, connecting with each other, that having heavy application burdens, having heavy reporting burdens, and making it so it's a stressful undertaking for people is not how you're going to get the most diverse pool of applicants. It's not how you're going to have the most diverse group of people engaged. Whether we're thinking if you need to go through a portal and if it's language, if it's accessible language-wise, are the people that you're looking to fund, are they connected to the internet? Do you need to maybe spend some of that money? Because we all know like less than 4 to 7% of larger funders, like money actually goes to us. A lot of it gets saved, there's reserve funds. So spend some of that money and send people into the communities and learn from the folks that are here. Because I can't tell Shreveport how to run their stuff. I can't tell Baton Rouge how to run their stuff because I don't live there. I'm not part of those communities. What I need to do in any way, whether I'm not a funder, but when I'm supporting, is go there and listen. So, like I said, to funders, philanthropists in the room, no heavy reporting requirements. If you can go to your board and make the conversation and make the argument on behalf of that organization that is doing the work of 15 people with the budget of 2 and actually have 3 on staff, then that's a huge help. That's actually going to further the work that your board wants to see done, the work that you want to see done, and the work that we need to ensure that our communities are strong, are resourced, and are not overwhelmed. Also, just take a look and see what is in alignment with white supremacy and colonial values. So when I say that, I mean looking at not just accessibility, but the way that you're talking about the work that people engage in. Do not tokenize people. It is more than possible for you to do that, even though you're funding. Just because you're funding someone does not mean that you see the true value in the work or fully understand. Just because you can talk to your board about it doesn't mean you understand the sweat, the tears, the time, and the sacrifice that often many people take to ensure that their neighbors are eating, their neighbors are heated, that we have solid policy in place. So just to recap, philanthropy, inherently harmful. Move from a space of repair, move from a space of listening, move from a space of access, and ensure that people can access those resources and with no to low barrier.
Thank you. Absolutely, absolutely. Leanne, I'll ask you the same question. So how can funders and LGBTQ organizations intentionally prioritize the work around immigration?
Ok. Me gustaría que se levantaran de pie proyectos, organizaciones que tienen un presupuesto menos de $100,000.
I would like folks to stand up if their project or organization has a budget lower than $100,000.
Gracias. Ahora, sin vergüenza, sin cubrirse de nada, donantes y fundadores.
And now, without any shame, without feeling apologetic or embarrassed, those who are funders or major donors.
¿Por qué estoy haciendo esto? Porque si se supone que es una conferencia de creando cambios, ahí están las conexiones. Ustedes hay que identificar a las personas, quiénes son donantes y quiénes son esas organizaciones que necesitan estos recursos. ¿Por qué?
Why am I doing this? Because this is a conference that's supposed to be called Creating Change, right? So here we see the connections between how you need to identify who are the funders and who are the organizations that really need these resources.
Basta de vernos como caridad. Nosotros no somos caridades. Lo que realmente necesitamos proyectar estrategias de unión, ayuda mutua y solidaridad. Cambiar estos lenguajes. ¿Por qué? Porque si lo empezamos desde la base comunitaria, culturalizándonos.
Enough of looking at us as charity. What we really need is project and strategies of union, mutual aid, and solidarity to change the language that we're using.
¿Y cómo podemos conectarnos unos a otros en estos espacios que se crean en las conferencias, en los eventos? Asistan a los eventos que con organizaciones de base hacemos. Muchas veces hacemos las invitaciones a donantes y fundadores. no tengo tiempo, pero te puedo mandar a fulano, pero te puedo mandar a sutano. Hay muchas maneras de seguir conectándonos. Visiten en nuestros lugares, visiten nuestros espacios, quién está haciendo el trabajo, ¿verdad? Y quién.
Okay, so we need to be connecting more. We need to be connecting in these spaces, in the spaces that this conference provides, in our own events. Show up to our events. Many times we invite donors and funders, but all we hear back is that we have no time, but I could send along so-and-so. We need you to connect with us, to visit our spaces.
Y en estas conferencias que estamos aquí, no sabemos quiénes son donantes, no sabemos quiénes son fundadores. ¿Por qué? Porque nada más vienen a estos espacios a ver si se realizó el trabajo que están escritos en las propuestas de estas conferencias, pero no conectan con nosotros como comunidad o con la población que estamos haciendo ese trabajo.
So in these conferences, many times we don't know who's a funder here, who's a major donor, and when we only see them or when they come here, it's only to come and see if the grant deliverables are happening or if the work that was proposed in a project is being carried out, but we don't really get to connect with them.
Entonces, ¿dónde está la solidaridad? ¿Dónde está la unión? ¿Dónde está el trabajo realmente de que venimos desde abajo y venimos creciendo, venimos resistiendo y algunos en resiliencia? Y sobre todo en el sur, sobre todo en el profundo sur.
So where's the solidarity? Where's the union? We're coming from the bottom with the work that we're doing, constantly growing in resistance, in resilience, and especially those who are here in the South, in the deep South.
Solo recordando las palabras de la directora de ayer, ¿estoy a salve? Eso lo dejo ahí.
Just reminding the words of a ED yesterday, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. So last but certainly not least, Leanne, I'm sorry, I just talked to Leanne. I need coffee. Neha, how can well-resourced funders and LGBTQ organizations intentionally prioritize and serve trans folks?
Yeah, so we're going to quickly shout this out first. I'm sure you all have seen, okay. I'm sure y'all have seen the QR codes that are like on your tables. You've seen them at our booths. We have like a graphic. Hopefully it's going to be on screen at some point. But if you scan that QR code as an individual, you can sign our no contract, no coffee pledge to support us. But also, you can ask your organizations, these major LGBT orgs, to sign onto a letter in support of queer and trans Starbucks workers. So, I mean, that's like a very direct way that you can support our work. But also wanted to, I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of the times, these organizations seem to not be listening to those of us who are the most vulnerable, who are struggling the most in our community, and they're not prioritizing us, right? Like, the priorities are going towards how can they get more funding, how can they get approval from, these people who have the most liberal of politics, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's important to actually support people who are, struggling, working class trans people, people who are, people of color, people who are disabled, people who have needs, who might not be, wealthy or able to, be at the forefront of these organizations. Y'all need to listen to us. Recently, something that we did, my union, so I run a subcommittee called the Trans Rights Action Committee. Actually, everyone here who's at the conference with our union is a member of TRAC. So we noticed that HRC had actually given Starbucks a 100% score on their corporate equality index. And we were like, that's not entirely accurate. I mean, like, as queer and trans workers at Starbucks, we know that, like, we are struggling to get access to healthcare. Starbucks changed our healthcare so that we're paying thousands more for access to gender-affirming care. We're facing discrimination from management. We are being harassed by customers. I mean, like, this is not a perfect work environment for queer and trans people. It needs to be so much better. So what we did is we have a lot of our reach has come from social media. So we took to social media and we were like, hey, we're going to directly come to you and ask you, like, listen to our stories. Here are our stories of how we as queer and trans workers have struggled. Like, HRC, you need to reevaluate this corporate equality index score. Like, actually listen to working class trans people. So.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And when we, absolutely, give them a round of applause. Speaking of care, we need to talk about prioritizing ourselves and self-care. As leaders, we have to have the capacity to do this work. And in order to build capacity, we need joy and radical self-care and rest, right? Right? Okay. And so we know that that doesn't happen without funding, without resources. So when we think about a more perfect organizational structure that has the funding and the resources, Pearl, what does that joy and self-care look like for you?
Thank you. If you don't mind, I want to add something to the
Go
last
right
question real
ahead.
quick. Also, philanthropists, funders, hire people that don't look like you. Like, make sure that when you're putting out your job descriptions, you don't have something fake like a master's when someone doesn't need a master's, and masters aren't financially accessible to a lot of people, and you got to be in the right place at the right time.
Pearl.
Some people do the work so they don't need the paper. Some people got
Pearl.
both. Thank you. I talk so fast all the time. This is me all the time. No coffee. But, you know, some people have the paperwork and some people have the expertise. Trust that expertise. Living something makes you an expert. So make sure you're trusting people when they apply and encouraging people on your job descriptions. Let people know. Do not be dissuaded by any educational requirements, or these are soft desires that we have for the role. We encourage X type of people to apply, whether you can be in office or not, remote work available for people in terms of accessibility. So ensure that you're not creating job descriptions for the status quo. We have no use for the status quo. That's why all of us are here right now to talk about how bullshit the status quo is, and we cannot change everything from this side. Thank
Absolutely.
you. I appreciate that.
No, thank you for bringing that up. I talked about this yesterday in our session, is how are we creating accessible pathways to leadership and positions? And that doesn't just mean putting someone somewhere and setting them up for failure. That means also equipping them with the training and skills and tools that they need to be successful in their role, not just for the optics or hiring folks to fill your quota or to get funding based on a grant. We need to be setting folks up intentionally for that success. So thank you for bringing that up. But speaking of money, baby, Wells Fargo is on my line. I owe them.
I'm like, good, they be all right.
It's okay, y'all owe people too.
Wells Fargo's fine.
But speaking, if I can get that payment down just a little bit, I can go on vacation. But speaking of vacation, like, tell us about what you're doing to take care of yourself, your joy, your resilience. How are you sustaining yourself? What does self-care look like for you?
So when it comes to self-care, it kind of collides with community care because they do depend on each other. I need my community for my self-care, and part of my self-care is caring for my community. I do a lot of things in the ripple system, as I call it. So at my core, I like to color, I like to draw, I like to write. Sometimes I'm too stressed out or I'm upset or whatever, and it feels like the words are blocked up at my wrist and they won't come out. That's when I know I need to lean into it more. I like to bake. I like to cook with my ancestors. That's my central ripple. That is me. And then the rest of it, the outer ripple, is spending time with loved ones. Many of them started out as friends and are now deeply, deeply cherished family that I have that keep me accountable, they keep me on point, and they can let me know if I'm trying to pretend I'm not wobbling in my strength, if I'm trying to pretend I'm not wavering in my joy, they can hold up a mirror, and that mirror is held with love, that mirror is held with compassion, but that mirror is also held with a realness, and that is something that adds to my self-joy, to be able to look out and see people reflecting on me that love me, that want me to be well, and I need to believe that. Now, I brought up in our planning call, some of the types of joy that I like are connected to a privilege. I enjoy going out and having a meal with my friends if I can, if we can all get together. I enjoy that. That's connected to a privilege. I like being able to go see my family, or maybe run to the next town over, somewhere else, go to Lafayette, talk to Peyton or something. There's a privilege there. I get to drive there, I get to gas up my car. So please know that I say all these things while acknowledging the specific space in which I stand, and that everything doesn't apply to everyone. But I do it in ripples. What is my joy? What can I do by myself? What can I do with myself? What can I do for myself? And then what do I need to depend on other people to help me with? This is not something I want to do alone. That whole no person is an island thing. To me, it's all Pangea. Like, we started out connected. We may be a little over there and over there, but I want to bring it back together. So that's my quick answer.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Neha, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What's bringing you joy? How are you sustaining yourself so that you continue to do this work?
So I'm gonna be real. Sometimes when you have these conversations about like mental health and self-care, sometimes it feels like that stuff's only for white people and cis people. And obviously it's not, but like sometimes there's such a burden and a weight on us. It feels hard to talk about self-care and joy right now, especially, but I think that where I get my joy and my comfort from is from community. It's not from just what I'm doing for myself. It's from the people around me. Like that comes from like when we organized my store. Like that really brought us together. It went from being like, oh, like morning shift is angry at night shift to like we're all like together in this fight against like this corporation, and it really brought us together. I've talked about this before, but like my store organized. It started as like we had horror movie nights. Like I would invite all of my coworkers over, and I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to watch Hellraiser? Do you want to watch Martyrs?" And like that is like how, from that like community is how like we ended up organizing, because we became friends, we became close. But also, I get a lot of joy from like solidarity with other organizers, from people who are fighting, for other really important causes. One thing that really brought me a lot of joy recently is, so there's a group in Oklahoma. It's called Oklahomans Against Occupation. They are a group of Palestinian activists, and me and a few of my coworkers went out to a rally they had at Scissortail Park, and afterwards, we went up to them and we were like, hey, like, we just want you to know, like, we support you, we've got your back, like, whatever we can do for you, we're here for you. And, like, we didn't expect anything from that, right? It was just, like, the right thing to do. But a few weeks later, whenever my store went on strike, these activists, they made, like, a graphic for social media and shared it to their thousands of followers, telling them that our strike was happening, telling them to come out to our strike, telling them to join us on the picket line. And they showed up, like a group of them showed up. And it's like a really sweet memory to me. It's just like this group of like Palestinian activists and like, these union organizers, me and my coworkers, like standing together on the picket line, like in solidarity. I mean, like, that's really what it's about. I mean, like, solidarity is power, solidarity is joy. Caring about each other is, joy. I think that's really important. That community is so essential. And And obviously, it's also important to like rest and take care of yourselves, and like not push yourself to the point of burnout or whatever. But I really just do think that like my joy comes from community. Like I love going to conferences like this with like other organizers because I finally get to meet like all of y'all in person. Like I don't know, talking to my like Starbucks organizers, like I don't know, like the past few days have been like amazing. Y'all are so cool. Y'all are so fun. Like I'm really glad that I get to like meet y'all. So other people and community is how I get self-care and joy.
Yeah, we find nourishment in the folks that we're in deep relation and community with. Absolutely. As much as we pour out, we also need to be poured into. And so it's important to be amongst folks who love and support us. Leanne, yes, my beautiful sister, what are you doing to take care of yourself and what's bringing you joy?
¿Qué me da felicidad y gozo? Estar aquí en este espacio con ustedes, reconectar, ¿verdad? En la pandemia nos enseñó cómo protegernos y cuidarnos y seguir nuestro trabajo en familia.
What brings me joy and happiness? Being in this space with you all, to be able to find ourselves together again. The pandemic taught us how to protect ourselves and care for one another.
¿Quiénes de ustedes que estamos aquí, solamente levanten la mano, se han ido a su sabático?
How many of you here, just raise your hand, have gone on a sabbatical?
Ahí está la respuesta. La palabra sabático únicamente lo conocen los fundadores y donantes.
There's your answer. The word sabbatical is only known to funders and donors.
¿Por qué lo creen? Porque son los que tienen los fondos.
Why do you think that is? It's because they have the funds.
Para irse a un sabático. Pero, sin embargo, nosotros hemos creado estrategias, proyectos, trabajo de base comunitario. En lo personal, puedo abrazar un árbol o me gusta abrazar los árboles cuando voy en un bosque. Me gusta ir a muchos retiros, invítenme a los retiros. Me gusta ir a los retiros al lado de la playa, vamos a llamarle en el bosque.
We need to continue working on our strategies, our projects, the grassroots work that we do. Personally, what I like to do, I like to hug trees in the forest. I love going to retreats, so invite me. I love going to retreats on the beach and retreats by the forest.
Donantes y fundadores, también pongan un poquito de dinero para irnos a un mini sabático, ni siquiera sabático lo vamos a tomar, pero piensen en nosotras que también estamos haciendo el trabajo.
Donors and funders also put some money aside for us to go on a mini sabbatical, not even a whole sabbatical, but think of us who are doing the work.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I just want to name that rest and time off should not be tied to productivity. Because that reinforces and continues to increase this scarcity mindset amongst the most marginalized folks that you all hire in the organizations, myself included. For a long time, I worked and overworked because I thought that if I didn't produce enough, that I would be replaced. And so if I continue to reduce my capacity, what good am I to anyone else in this movement? Yes, so I just want to name that. So we're right about, we're about at time, but I want to close this plenary with a call to action from each of you because you all do such impactful work. So just let folks, give them a call to action. Neha, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. There's that QR code you can sign to sign our No Contract, No Coffee pledge. Again, put pressure on your orgs and major LGBT orgs to sign on to our letter in support of queer and trans workers. I have completely forgotten the date of the sip-in. Can one of y'all stand?
Saturday, 10 to 1:30.
Okay, yes. So there's a sip-in at a store that just recently filed for election, right? Okay, awesome. So if y'all would be able to come out and support these workers, we would really appreciate it.
That's the Maple Street location? Oh, 1001 Elite, that's where I be going. All right. So 1001 Elysian Fields.
Right. I'm so sorry that I forgot the names and the address and time and all that. Being up here, my brain, I'm kind of in being on stage, my brain just kind of goes into bimbo mode just a little bit. But yeah, and also I would really encourage y'all to look for unionized Starbucks near you. If you're in a major city, there's probably one close to you.
Yeah.
If you don't want to support Starbucks, I know a lot of us have reasons not to. You can still go to these stores, get a Trenta cup of water. It's free. The company doesn't get anything for it. And give the workers a message of support. Order under the name Union Strong or something like that. Leave them a tip. We love tips. We love money. Tips are how I pay for Taco Bell and weed.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really just support workers. We need your support. We're fighting this really difficult fight, and having your support, having community support means so much to us.
Yes,
so.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And if you don't want to go to a Starbucks and you want to go get some Black queer-owned coffee, you can go to Up and Adam Eats at 3903 Canal Street. It's one of the only Black queer-owned restaurants in the city of New Orleans. Thank you. So, Pearl, give us a call to action.
Yes, I have a call to action and I have a resource for Louisiana folks. Our young people have lost access to their gender affirming care. We are fighting it in litigation, so we'll see what happens. But there is a fund with Louisiana Trans Advocates. I'm the ED for the Reproductive Justice Action Collective, or REJAC. Thank y'all. So there's a fund. Thank you. There's a fund with Campaign for Southern Equality, Louisiana Trans Advocates, and REJAC. It is a trans youth emergency fund. It is no to low barrier. We were just talking about joy. There's nothing you have to spend that on. So if you know families and young people that need access to $500 stipends for maybe it's dinner, maybe it's shopping, we don't ask because it's not our business. You can do a quick search and you'll find one for Louisiana, and I know they have some for other states. So my call to action is to check that out, is to spread that information where you can. And then I have a specific call to action for funders since we were talking about them. I want you to go back to your board and see how much more work you all can take on and take off of the people you're funding. I would love to see you have your application process, and for your application processes to be available for audio recording and video recording, for your reporting to be available through audio recording and video recording, and see how people like that, how the people you are funding like that. Once again, having at least your application process, so the next creating change, y'all can let us know. Y'all can report to us how that went. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I actually shout out one more thing?
Very brief.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to shout out one more thing. I forgot to say this. Come visit our booth. You can possibly get one of our cool t-shirts. So that was the one other thing I wanted to mention.
Absolutely. Check out the booth.
Yes.
Leanne, closing us out, give us a call to action.
Oui.
inmigración, justicia del lenguaje, gente de clase trabajadora, no pobre, porque le tenemos que chingarle. Ups, mi palabrita. Pero la llamada a la acción es seguir repitiendo quizás algunas, lo que ya hemos escuchado. ¿Realmente estamos a salvo? Yo me quedo con eso, quédense con eso también. Sabemos que el mundo ha tratado de cambiarnos. El mundo
Call to action, immigration, language justice, working class and poor folks who gotta work hard to bring money home. Call to action, basically it's to continue repeating what we've heard here. Are we really safe? We know that the world has tried to change us.
Como poblaciones latinas, inmigrantes, indígenas y toda la diversidad negra, siempre nos han minorizado. El mundo ha tratado de cambiarnos, haciéndonos a un lado con un sistema que nos criminaliza, que nos persigue, pero lo que no saben, allá afuera, todas estas personas que crean esas propuestas o que nos ponen en esa marginalización olímpica, quién tiene más poder, quién no tiene poder, quién tiene más privilegios, quién no tiene privilegios. Sabemos que estamos aquí. Esta es la familia que debemos de trabajar, interno, externo. Y recuerden también, descansar, no solo trabajar. Y vamos por nuestra felicidad.
Okay, so they tried to change us as Latina, immigrant, indigenous, Black, diverse communities. We know that the world has always tried to make us seem as if we're minorities and try to change us, creating systems that criminalize and persecute us. But those people out there who are creating these policies and trying to who marginalize us and try to create these oppression Olympics about who has privilege and who doesn't. What we really know is that we who are here, we are family, and we need to work within ourselves and outside of ourselves to accomplish the work, and remember to also rest and not just work all the time.
Y les quiero hacer una invitación que asistan a los talleres donde se están dando en español durante la conferencia. Tenemos a la compañera Ana Andrea Molina, que por ahí está, va a tener un taller en español. Tenemos también el taller de este niño de Puerto Rico, de Gerald Vega, también vaya en ese taller. Tenemos el taller de nosotros también con Di, que vamos a hacer el futuro de Creando Cambio. Exactamente, hoy también tenemos Instituto Latine. El Instituto Latine también vamos a estar hablando también en español. Entonces, asistan a estos eventos, a estos proyectos. Donantes y fundadores, les quiero ver ahí.
And so an invitation is for everyone here to go to the workshops that are being held in Spanish. Andrea Molina is holding a workshop in Spanish. Gerald Vega from Puerto Rico is going to be doing a workshop in Spanish. Dee and I are going to be doing a workshop on the future of creating change. And today we're having the Latina Institute in Spanish, so we just encourage everyone to attend those spaces. Donors and funders, I want to see you there.
Thank you so much. Give each of our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me to moderate this conversation, and thank each of you for the work that you're doing. Thank you, Creating Change.
Oh, no, you're fine.
My loves, y'all did a fabulous job. Thank you. All right, everyone, we're not quite done yet. We found a phone, honey. People losing phones out here. If you need it, I got it. And I'm gonna hand it off to somebody backstage. So if you need it, come backstage. But wasn't that a fabulous panel? Give it up. All right. One mic. One mic, how we doing? We good? Okay, we have a little bit more programming, and then we're gonna go out for our sessions. So thank you for rolling with us. We know we're going a little bit over time, but we still have another rich, powerful speaker who's gonna grace the stage. But I do wanna say one thing that was so funny to me backstage was when that moment when the house lights came on and y'all all gasped like it was like the end of a club night. That took me out. But I'm taking so much away from that panel, moving from feeling powerless to making sure that our people feel safe, feel joy from solidarity, divorcing from white supremacist and colonial values, honey. We're talking about moving from a space of repair, understanding that living something makes you an expert. That was a bar. So I want to thank our fabulous panel for showing us so much about what liberation means right now and what liberation can look like. And the task force also wants to acknowledge SEIU for their support and sponsorship of the National LGBTQ Task Force and, of course, Creating Change. And the task force is proud to be in solidarity with working folks like the incredible queer and trans leaders of Starbucks Workers United. So I'm gonna plug again. Make sure that you go out to the booth and talk to our folks, learn about what they're doing to build power and community workers better. All right, so we know that trans power is real, y'all, and we're going to continue to need it as we face mountains of hate and misinformation from all those folks who are mad that we refuse to be silent, we refuse to be mischaracterized, and we refuse to be denied the delicious lives that we deserve. And whenever I feel drained by all of the attacks on our community, I try to tap into our history. It may sound a little cheesy, but I do believe knowing our history builds up our personal and collective power, y'all. Give it up. Yes. And that's why folks are coming for our history, erasing it in school curricula, banning our books, and shutting down literacy initiatives like our beloved Drag Queen Story Hours. And it's important now, more than ever, to tell our stories, our histories, our her stories, our their stories. With all this in mind, I would love to introduce our next speaker, someone who needs no intro here in New Orleans. Frank Perez, who is known to locals as French Quarter Frank, is a historian and writer who brings New Orleans queer history to life in his walking tours and books. And he's going to talk about the anniversary of the upstairs lounge fire in 1973. So give it up for Frank.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are enjoying New Orleans. If it is your first time here, just eat more than you should, you'll fit right in. Okay. So I've been given a few moments to speak with you this morning about some local history. I'm going to touch on 4 marginalized groups, but if you only remember one thing that I say in the next few minutes, I want it to be this. So please listen carefully. Memory work is an act of resistance. Why do I say that? I say that memory work is a form of resistance because when we recover our history, when we reclaim our history, when we record our history, we are preserving stories that the straight, white, heteronormative patriarchy desperately wants us to forget. And that is why it is important to recover and reclaim and record these histories. We have a lot of great history in New Orleans. I just want to touch on 4, and I'd like to begin by hearkening back to yesterday's plenary session topic, and that was the indigenous culture and spirit that is still much alive. If you look at the screens, you will see the front cover of a literary academic journal called Bulbancha is Still a Place. This is a local independent journal that indigenous people are putting out, and I love the cover of this because if you notice very carefully, this is a statue of Andrew Jackson in front of St. Louis Cathedral, not too far from here, and his head is missing. This is an actual photograph because about 100 years ago in the 1920s, someone lopped his head off, which I think is a wonderful thing. Okay. I'll just say this very briefly. I think you all know, so I will not belabor the point, but when the European colonizers arrived here, they were absolutely shocked to discover that indigenous people were anything but binary, right? They were very queer embracing, although they wouldn't have used that term, and so queerness and their notions of gender and sexuality, which are so progressive today, were very much a part of their daily culture and lives. And so we're proud of that heritage here in Bulbancha. I will also say on that note that the state of Louisiana currently, right now, recognizes 14 indigenous nations in Louisiana. There are a lot more, although the federal government only recognizes 4. And so there are a lot of tribes in Louisiana that are struggling to get federal recognition because that's important not only because of the dignity of being recognized, but it also provides practical benefits like disaster relief from the federal government when hurricanes hit. And so if you want to learn more about local indigenous history, there's a wonderful book called The Great Power of Small Nations, written by Elizabeth Ellis, and I would strongly recommend that book. So let's go to our next slide. Here we see a picture of a streetcar in front of an obelisk. I don't know if you can see that. This picture is fairly old, but that obelisk is a monument to what some locals call the Battle of Liberty Place. Basically, what happens is this. The year is 1874. White supremacists are pissed off at the gubernatorial election. So what do? They violently overthrow the government in an insurrection. Sound familiar? Okay. There is nothing new under the sun, right? And so white supremacists form this group called the White League. Today we might call them a right-wing militia. They march through the central business district down to Canal Street, just a few blocks from where we are now. And they encounter progressive advocates, advocates of Reconstruction at the time. There is a battle in the middle of Canal Street right in front of what is now Harrah's Casino. 35 people dead. They violently overthrow the state government. They occupy the city for a few days until the federal government comes in and squashes that. But what I really want to call your attention to is the inscription on the monument. The monument was erected in 1891, and then in 1934, the city put this inscription. Can you read that? It says, white supremacy. Okay, so in 2017, a few years ago, the city of New Orleans took this monument down finally, along with a few other statues. That's okay, you can applaud. In 2017, the city of New Orleans took down 3 statues of Confederate heroes and this monument. And it was long overdue, obviously, but it was really controversial when they did that. And I will never forget, my proudest moment as a tour guide was I was leading a tour in the French Quarter, and I had this really knuckle-dragging lady on tour. And she just, we were not talking about the Civil War, we were not talking about the monuments, but she kept asking me at every stop, what do you think about the monuments? They're erasing history, blah, blah, blah. You know the line, right? And I finally got really frustrated with her, and I said, ma'am, do you have any children? She says, yes. I says, well, let me ask you a question. If somebody kidnapped your children and sold them into slavery, where should we erect the statue of the kidnappers? She got pissed off, she cursed me out, she left the tour, and it was my proudest moment as a tour guide. So if we could go to the next slide, please. The next slide is a picture of a group of men and one woman. These were the regulars at a bar called the Upstairs Lounge, which was a small gay bar on the edge of the French Quarter, not too far from here, which catered to a working class crowd in the early 1970s. The Upstairs Lounge was a very unique bar at the time because it did not discriminate on the basis of race or sex, right? They welcomed women and lesbians and different colored people. That was not the case in New Orleans at the time. A lot of the bars were segregated. The gay bars were segregated, queer bars were segregated by orientation. But the Upstairs Lounge embraced everybody, including what today we would call trans people. And so in 1973, a young sex worker who was a regular at the bar got really, can I say fucked up? He got really fucked up. And he was being belligerent and obnoxious, got into a fight, was physically escorted out of the bar, ejected. As he's being thrown out, he says, I'm gonna come back and burn you all out of here. Nobody paid it much attention. It's just a young kid getting thrown out of a bar. Happens all the time in the French Quarter. But Roger Dale Nunez made good on his promise. He came back about 25 minutes later, set the stairwell on fire, and within a matter of 19 minutes, 29 people were dead. 3 more died at the hospital. So the death toll was 32 people. That was on June 24th, 1973. Deadliest fire in New Orleans history to this day. And until the Pulse Massacre in Orlando in 2016, deadliest fire or deadliest crime against LGBT people in our nation's history. What happened? Well, the police didn't give a shit, obviously. They never arrested the young man, even though they knew it was him. The media made jokes about the victims. New Orleans, I say that to let you know that New Orleans, as tolerant and embracing and wonderful as it is today, wasn't always that way, okay? And the reason is capitalism, right? Because when tourism came into its own as an industry in New Orleans in the 1940s and 50s after World War II, the white power structure that ran the city was scared that queer visibility would scare off tourist dollars. And so the city's attitude was, we know there's a bunch of you living in the French Quarter, just tone it down, don't be so obvious. And to their discredit, the community was okay with that. But when this happened, it kind of started to change things. And so the Upstairs Lounge fire was a seminal moment in our city's history. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the tour that I'm offering on Saturday morning. But I've only got a few minutes, so let me go to my next slide. And the next slide should be a picture of my good friend Courtney Sharp. And Courtney Sharp is an unsung trans hero. Courtney Sharp grew up in a small, very religious town in North Louisiana, realized at an early age that she was trans, didn't know how to deal with it, no reference points, nothing to help her, right? She dealt with that internal struggle by devoting herself to education. She became a chemical engineer and eventually got a great job not far from New Orleans working at one of the chemical plants. When she decided that she was going to transition, she approached her HR department and said, I want to start dressing as a woman when I come to work. They said, you can't do that. She's like, well, why not? And they're like, well, you'd be creating a hostile work environment. Okay. So she didn't do it initially, but eventually she did. She began seeing a gender therapist in Houston, which was the closest she could find at the time, and eventually she did transition and she was fired. She became very depressed. She considered killing herself, but she decided not to do that because she told herself, I know why so many people like me are killing themselves, and these young people need help. And so she devoted herself to the local New Orleans chapter of PFLAG, of which she is still involved today. And PFLAG, give it up for PFLAG. So what not a lot of people realize, and this is an important part of national trans history, the New Orleans chapter of PFLAG, under Courtney's leadership, eventually became the first chapter in the country to include trans people in their mission statement, and that took several years. But then when that was accomplished, she turned her attention to the national PFLAG chapter. And after about a 10-year struggle, she was successful in convincing National PFLAG in 1998 to be the first national LGBTQ organization to include trans people in their mission statement. And so Courtney is a dear friend of mine. She's still very much involved in the community. I don't think she's here today. But my point is I've given you 4 stories or 4 topics. There are hundreds more. New Orleans has an incredibly rich literary heritage, and I would encourage you to study that and look into it, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants to learn more resources about that. In the meantime, remember, memory work is a form of resistance, and we need to resist. So thank you very much for your time.
My hope for the next 50 years is that the movement and the community is led by Black and brown trans voices, those that are within the margins, because when we center the most marginalized, it is equitable and accessible for all.
What's important to me right now is a national employment discrimination bill. Because here in California and also in Texas, you can get married on Friday, but then fired on Monday.
Years ago, a group of queer activists came together to build a world where we could all be free to live as our most authentic selves. What is now the National LGBTQ Task Force became one of the first national gay rights organizations in the US. We helped organize the largest LGBTQ rights marches in the country's history and led the first ever meeting between queer activists and a sitting presidential administration. We demanded equality for service members and trained grassroots activists to advocate for LGBTQ families in their hometowns. We queered the census and the vote and show up for immigrants, reproductive justice, bodily autonomy, housing justice, and criminal justice reform. Today, we're reminded that progress is never linear. We've seen the seeds of fascism and white supremacy grow and jeopardize our lives. The same misinformation, fear-mongering, and lies used against us are being recycled and used to dehumanize trans and non-binary people in our community. It's in these moments of adversity where change happens. New structures are created and new alliances are formed. It's never been easy, but that's never stopped us. We're activists who show up to protest by day and the dance floor by night. We're going to keep living and leading our boundless joy, love, and community. Every day, we're dared to envision a world where queer people are not simply accepted, but where we are celebrated and thriving. There is no better way to honor that vision for the next 50 years of our movements than by creating a world where you are free to be you.
We are creating change.
Estamos creando cambio.
We are creating change.
We are the National LGBTQ Task Force, and we've been creating change for 50 years. And here's to 50 more.
Work. That was amazing. So we went from history with Frank. Give it up for Frank. And give it up for the souls that he lifted up in his address. And then we went to the next 50 years, and y'all are all a part of it, etched in this history. So thank you for being here and showing up as well. All right, so in closing, we want to make sure that we recognize all of the colleagues and staff and co-conspirators who made this event possible, made this conference possible. And we also want to thank all of our co-conspirators at Unite Here, and formally thank and recognize the hotel staff who are just keeping us afloat over these days. And also been given this statement as well. As members of Unite Here Local 23, workers at Hilton Riverside, New Orleans have won affordable union health insurance, including coverage for gender-affirming care. Big, they said big annual raises, honey. Fair scheduling, job security, and so much more. And they won their first union contract in 2018 after a multi-year campaign organizing their coworkers and standing up to their employer. So give it up. If that ain't change, I don't know what is. So, do y'all know our mantra for this week? I know some people were here yesterday. We're gonna close out with our chant. Queer power, queer action, queer joy. Y'all got that? All right. 1, 2, 3. Queer power, queer action, queer joy. One more time, so the folks who left early can hear us. Queer power, queer action, queer joy. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of today's sessions.